Welcome to the Spunky Spirit Podcast. I'm your host, psychic medium Carrie Muggs. This is where we learn all things spirit, everything from spiritual gifts, awakenings, ghosts, aliens, and starseeds. Nothing is untouchable, but always fun and spunky. I am honored to be on this spiritual journey with you, so make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Spunky Spirit. I am Carrie Muggs, and this week, as promised, we're going to talk about UFOs. Or sometimes they're called UAPs, unidentified. I don't know what AP stands for. I don't know. So this has always been one of my... I've always loved this topic. And the reason why is because... I think my dad had talked one time about seeing a UFO over a baseball field where we live, and he was really into it too. He really believed it. He loved the stars. He would show me the different stars at night when we would look up in the sky and the different constellations. And so I've always been fascinated with UFOs and starseeds and aliens. And to be honest, when my dad would talk about alien abductions and when I was little, it would kind of scare me, kind of freak me out. But I just feel like we are kind of arrogant to think that we are the only living species existed ever. Or in this, I mean, the universe is huge. And there's so many unanswered questions and things like that. So it's kind of hard for me to think that, and here's the thing, the government has acknowledged that there are UFOs or in the sky. So, but people just kind of bypass this because it came during when the pandemic was here, and they talk about these things when other things are going on. So they distract us. And so we don't really know what's going on. Like just recently, there's been lots of UFO sightings, and with like the weather balloon, the China weather balloon. So here's the thing. I forgot when I was little, one of my favorite shows was Close Encounters of the Third Time, when Richard Dreyfuss would make the potato, the potato mountain. I don't know if any of you guys have seen it, but it was awesome, and my dad would watch it over and over and over again. So I'm going to kind of go over all the stuff that's been going on recently, all the stuff that's been kind of going on that the government's reporting, but we kind of don't really talk about it, or we pretend it's not happening. And so it's just kind of interesting. A couple of my friends have had experiences of seeing white lights in the sky. I only kind of remember had an experience with like a glowing type being, but I honestly don't know if that was an alien or an angel type. But to me, angels are not of this earth either. So anything not of this earth, it's kind of an alien of some sort. So, but it was just like this big glowing thing that was standing outside my window when I was younger. And I didn't really feel scared. I was kind of calm. And I kind of didn't remember it the next morning. I just kind of, now that I think back about it now, it's just kind of weird, because that's how a lot of people, they think about their UFO experiences. They don't really remember it till years later, or they remember it, they don't really talk about it. It's like some sort of thing kind of shuts them down so they don't talk about it, or people think they don't talk about it because people think they're crazy. Just there's so many different synchronicities about that. So, and UFOs have been around, like people have seen sightings for a really long time. In fact, I was kind of in one of Dolores Cannon's books. There was she does a lot of hypnotherapy or hypnosis, and people go back into like past lifetimes, and people remember past lifetimes as being in a different planet or being an alien of some sort or something different. But she also talks about, or I think it was Dolores, or it might have been something else. But there was a picture of Mary, Jesus' mother, Mother Mary, and she was holding Jesus. And in the background, there's like this circly thing. I can't remember exactly what the picture was called, but some people claim that that is a UFO in the background. They think that that's a UFO, or some sort of alien object. So I thought that was interesting too. I don't really remember what the picture is, but if I see it, or if while I'm looking it up, I will list it down in the show notes so you can look at it later. Also in the show notes, that is, as you can see, I'm trying to tap it in. So also in the show notes is going to be all of the places, all of the links where I got all of this information. So there's going to be lots of different places where I got a lot of this information, and there's all going to be links down below in the show notes so you can kind of see where we're going, or see what we've been, or you can read it yourself, or you can, there's a story that you kind of like, you can like go look at it if you want more of elaboration on it. So some of the things that are going on now. So the White House has confirmed that the U.S. Air Force has been shooting down unidentified flying objects, or UFOs, across the country, in other countries and around the world. And they have been dealing with these similar issues in 2023. So they have acknowledged, and I'm getting this from Newsweek, so hopefully that's and again, a link will be down below. So in the U.S., the current sightings began when a UFO was spotted on February 1st. It initially caused concern before it was later identified as a high-altitude Chinese surveillance balloon and shot down on February 4th off the coast of South Carolina. On Friday, February 10th, another unidentified object was spotted and shot down over northern Alaska. Then a radar anomaly was detected and shot down on Saturday, February 11th, over northern Montana. However, that object has not been recovered yet. So a UFO was spotted on Sunday, and I don't know what Sunday they're talking about, because I think it's probably the 12th, I would guess. When was the last one? On the 11th. So yeah, Sunday, February 12th. Over the Canada's Yukon territory and shot down by the U.S. Air Force. And on the same day, the White House confirmed that the military had destroyed another unidentified object near Lake Huron in Michigan. It's Huron. So a senior White House administration official described this object as having an octagonal shape, and strings hanging from it with no discernible payload, I guess is what that says, whatever that means. Chinese authorities confirmed that they were planning to shoot down another unidentified flying object that had been sighted in the skies near the Shandong province. So authorities are preparing to shoot the object down on Sunday, and it was not clear whether it had taken place. So there's been lots of different things going on. In fact, I remember seeing a meme saying, when are they just going to tell us that we've been invaded? Which I kind of thought was funny. But UFO sightings, I think this, honestly, you guys, this has been happening for a long time. And I think that they still are hiding things about this. I think our government's not telling us all the things. And I don't know if it's because they think that we can't handle it, or they think that, I don't know why they're hiding it, or they don't think that we're not ready, or what's going on. But a local news outlet also explained that there had been a UFO sighting, and in the headline it said a UFO in the form of a ball was shot down in the sky. And this was in Privet Rostov. I think this was, I'm not really sure where that is. The region where the UFO was spotted is considered to be strategic value for the war of Ukraine and its borders, the Sea of Azov, which is bounded by Russia. So yeah, I thought that was in Russia. On the east, and by the Ukraine on the northwest and the southwest. So Newsweek has contacted the ministries of foreign affairs for Russia, China, and White House, and there's no comment. Of course, there's no comment. So I just thought that was the craziest thing, because it was just, they all kind of happened at once. And honestly, I don't think the government could have hidden it very well. So honestly, there's so many, Area 51 is huge. It was on the Independence Day. There's people saying that there's lots of different stories about that area. And there's a book out there called A White-Tailed Horse. I think I'll put that in the show notes too. And it's kind of, some of it's kind of boring, but some of it's kind of good. And he had acknowledged, he served in the military, and he acknowledged that not only he was on the ocean, in the sea, and he saw a UFO come out of the water, and it came up, and he just stood there because he was terrified. And his captain came up behind him and said, you didn't see, after it disappeared, you didn't see anything. So not only are these things coming from the sky, sometimes people think they can come from the ocean, which I've said a bazillion times, that our ocean, my girls have reminded me that our ocean is also filled with like other life forms and things like that. I just think that the world is so big and the universe is so big that this isn't an impossible thing. It's not. And I try and keep an open mind about this because spirits are, I can see, you know what I mean? If there's just different, and I have seen, when I have done readings, I've seen guides and stuff that are not like human. So, but mostly I see spirits, but they try and, I see like an energy of them. So I don't really see what they look like, but I know that they've got a different kind of feel to them. So I don't know what exactly that is. And I'm not going to try and, say anything about it. But I do know that I've told you before that my husband has seen Bigfoot, and I don't know if Bigfoot is an alien or has vortexes that they come through, but I just know that there's more to this than we know, and I don't know if the government's, I can't say if it's trying to be hidden or they just don't know, or they're pretending to be naive. Who knows? But I just know, very open-minded to this existing, and the government has said it exists. It exists. These unidentified flying objects exist. But sometimes we have to wonder, are they ours or are they from somewhere else? I firmly believe they are from somewhere else, just because some experiences that my dad had, but who's to say, right? That thing that my dad saw maybe came from our own government. Who knows? But I'm going to kind of go in a little bit of some of these stories. I thought that there were some stories that were kind of cool that we're going to kind of talk about. So, and just so you know too, there's one called an Allagash abductees. Now, sometimes these stories are similar and sometimes they're not. Sometimes some people have a tranquil, peaceful experience and some have a horrifying experience. It's all kind of different. So, but this is called the Allagash abductees, and there were 4 men. Their names were Jack Weiner, Jim Weiner, Chuck Rock, R-A-R-K, and Charlie Fultz. And they were in the woods they were in the wilderness in Maine. And they did not talk about it for years. But what happened is they started to have memories later on about what happened. And if you listen to some of Samantha Faye's podcast too, she says the same thing. She had an experience when she was younger, and she remembers the experience, but she remembers not talking about it. She remembers that she just didn't feel like she could talk about it, or she didn't remember if it was in her memory. But the next day, people were talking about it. It was in the news, the sighting that she had seen, and she still didn't say anything when her dad read the paper to her about the sighting. And same with a lot of people who claim that they have had experiences. They just feel calm, and they don't feel like the need to talk about it. A lot of people believe that once you have this experience, they erase your memories. So there was also a group that Samantha had talked about on one of her podcasts, I don't remember which one, that boys had been abducted, and they remembered everything, and for some reason they remembered the aliens, the little, I think they did tell them that they were little gray men. They did say that. Said they had to hurry and land or put the boys back because there was something going, there was some sort of government ship or government something coming, and so they had to hurry and transport the boys back to land. And when the boys were in the tent, they, unbeknownst to them, had recorded everything that happened to them. So on their phones, they woke up the next morning. If I can find the information on this, I will tell you. I just thought it was so crazy. They woke up the next morning. They didn't remember anything, but they played back the recordings on their phones and heard about the whole incident. It was the craziest thing. I love that story. I did kind of try and look for that story to tell you, because I loved it so much, but I couldn't find it. So I found this one though. And these four men were camping or in Maine. And for years, Jack Weiner was really disturbed about these because he'd have recurring nightmares, and he didn't tell anybody about it except for his wife. And I'm just going to read what it says here. He said, I was starting to have nightmares, really terrible nightmares that I could not explain. I found myself in a very brightly lit room. I had no idea where I was or why I was there. To my left, I could see my brother Jim, Chuck, and Charlie, Jim was his brother, sitting on some type of bench, and they were all naked. I was wondering why they weren't helping me because I felt like I was in danger. And while I'm trying to figure this out, I noticed this figure or dark shadowy type figure emerging from the light, this bright light that was in front of me. I would wake up and be super sweaty and breathing heavily, so he's dreaming about this, and just in a state of terror and shock. And then in 1988, Jack's twin brother, Jim, confessed that he too was haunted by the same exact nightmare. And there was always certain elements to the dreams that were the same. Some type of creature they felt helpless. There was some type of creature there. They were being violated in some way, and they often woke up terrified. In every dream that they had, though, the twins were always with the same two boys, Charlie and Chuck, and they were high school friends. And so they wondered if these nightmares could be connected to the camping trip that they did 12 years earlier in Maine. And this was clear back in 1976. So the four men spent 2 weeks together in 1976 in the Allagash Wilderness. And this is thousands of acres in the northernmost part of the state. So on the second night, Jim noticed a bright object in the sky, and it was floating above the treetops. Didn't seem to be moving in any direction, and I looked at it through the binoculars for maybe 15 seconds, 30 seconds, and it suddenly just winked out from the outside edges inward. It literally just went whoop like that, and it was gone. There was something about this thing that left me with an odd feeling, and I wasn't quite right. It wasn't quite right, but I really didn't dwell on it. The men continued through the Allagash Wilderness. On the fourth day, they decided to try some night fishing. So they built a bonfire to mark their campsite, and once out in the water, Chuck was the first one to realize that they weren't alone. I had a feeling there was someone staring at me from behind me. I turned over my right shoulder, and I saw this large round globe of light that looked exactly what we had seen 2 nights previously. It had this rolling effect to it, like a miniature sun, very, very bright, and lit the treetops up like daylight, and it was absolutely silent. After looking at it for what seemed several moments, we decided to signal this thing, and when Charlie picked up the flashlight and squeezed off a message SOS. So and then the response was instantaneous. But I want to stop here for a minute because they're telling you it was a ball of some sort, and that news article that I just read that just happened recently said there was a ball. And also too when I watched Skinwalker Ranch, the cigar shape, there's a lot of other cigar shape things that happen. And Skinwalker Ranch is one of my favorites because it is both UFO, alien type, and paranormal and spiritual. And they kind of combine the two. And I just feel like, feel like they're combined somehow. This spiritual and alien stuff is kind of combined somehow. And that's why I always want to kind of deep digger into the UFO or the paranormal stuff, because I feel like it really is combined. So anyways, so after the SOS message, then the light started coming towards us. My curiosity was satisfied, and I just dropped the flashlight. The only thought in my mind was to get to shore. I never looked back. So they start to paddle back to shore, and Jack says, I remember looking over my shoulder, trying to keep an eye on this object as it was coming up behind us. It was getting very close, and it was almost on top of us at this point. I remember thinking that we were not going to outrun this thing. And then the next memory was being back on shore, just staring up at a bright object. So Jim says, I remember thinking I could pick up a stone and bounce it off the side of this thing. That's how close it was. And then all of a sudden, it just streaked away very, very fast. And within seconds, it was like a star, just another light in the sky. And then Chuck says, I remember stepping out of the canoe and going up to the campsite. And I remember there was no panic. We just seemed to be very relaxed. All four men agree that they were out on the lake less than 20 minutes. The huge bonfire should have burned for hours, and yet the coals were the only things that remained, indicating that they had been there longer. Jack says the unusual thing is that we didn't stay up for hours and discuss this thing, which is what I'm saying. Which is what everybody says. They didn't talk about it, which is what you would think four guys on a camping trip would do. We just seemed very fatigued and wanted to go to bed. The next morning, we got up, got our camp together, and paddled to the next campsite. The men spent another 10 days in the wilderness, but never again saw the bizarre light. As the years went by, they told friends and family about the UFO sighting, but no one really believed them, and the men hardly believed it themselves. Then the nightmares began for Jim and Jack. Finally, Jim contacted UFO researcher Jay Fowler to help. Fowler suggested that the four undergo hypnosis with a trained hypnotherapist to recover details of the sighting. Under hypnosis, each of the men experienced terrifying, repressed memories of being abducted. They were all almost exactly alike, independent from one another, so they weren't there during each other's sessions. Each of them drew illustrations of their incredible recollections, and all four said they were taken aboard a craft, that the aliens forced them to strip naked and seemed to be conducting some sort of medical examinations, and they took samples of their skin and body fluids, blood, urine, and semen. And so then you can read, there's also, they tell you exactly what happened in each session, and I'm not going to go over that because it's kind of, I don't know, it's just kind of crazy. And in case you're listening with kids in the car, usually, anyways, the link to this story is below in the show notes if you want to keep reading about that. But I just thought it was interesting that they all underwent hypnosis by themselves, and they all had a similar memory, and they were all having, the two brothers were having nightmares all the time. So I thought that was a cool kind of story, but you can find UFO stories or websites all over, and all over the internet, and I will give you a list at the end. And I don't think I'll have those in the show notes, so just you might want to remember those, some of the lists in the podcast at the end. So here's some other abductions. In 1979, this one's called the Vanishing Silver Ship. Well, these aren't abductions, these are just sightings. So from his front step in Wenatchee, Washington, a man watched a silver triangular aircraft with no discernible fuselage, no wings or other protruding control devices, coast slowly over the top of 150-foot tall poplar trees. A jetliner could not have stayed airborne in such a sedate rate of speed, he recalled, and this was significantly larger than a Boeing 747. There wasn't much time to wonder about the physics that kept the craft in flight, because it was drifting straight towards Birch Mountain. My immediate thought was that the monstrous crash was imminent. The witness explained, but it never came to pass. Instead, it just disappeared. So the NUFORC actually vouched for this particular onlooker. One of two excellent reports from the same witness. They wrote in a note below this report, "We know this witness. We have spoken to him several times, and he formerly served in the U.S. military and held a high security clearance." So that was kind of cool. A lot of times it is military people. I just have to say, I was so infatuated with some of this stuff that I wrote my senior thesis on it. And I remember going, "Oh my gosh." And I have been so into this for a really, really long time. So we're going to read one more, and then I'll kind of tell you different facts about them. This one's called "The Ideas of March Sightings in 1995. Now, this New Fork received an influx of calls. I'm not sure what this New Fork is, NUFORC, but on March 15th, 1955, New Fork received an influx of calls across several states from witnesses who saw a bright object flying through the night sky. The first of these so-called March sightings was reported by two men in Florida who described a luminous white and disc shape. Though subsequent descriptions from others varied, a Tennessee caller thought it was more of a blue-green cloud of light that emitted sparks before vanishing, and a Missouri State Highway Patrol sergeant said it was a green light that turned yellow and suddenly snuffed out like a light being switched off. He also explained that many people called the patrol's 911 dispatch that night to report their own sightings, and one person claimed his cell phone and car radio both died when the UFO got close, which is what happens on Skinwalker Ranch a lot. Other reports came from Virginia, West Virginia, and Missouri. In summary, it appears that one or more egg-shaped objects radiating intensely bright green or blue-green yellow light and periodically spewing out clouds of sparks streaked over the last 7 states, stopping from time to time. The whole event occurred in a matter of minutes. And also, too, I think people remember the Phoenix Lights of 1997. A lot of people, this is where you're like, okay, is this us, or is this like, is this from Earth, from other countries, or our own government? But I think a lot of people have stated that they've seen some of the aliens. They've seen the grays, and these are the little... There was one in Mexico a long time ago, and a group of kids saw all of them and described them. Again, I've read all these stories, but I don't know the exact, and I should have looked before, but these group of kids saw the grays and described them. And these are kids. These are kids that remember it and kind of repress it and then remember it later. So the last story I'm going to read to you is about elk that were abducted in 1999. 3 foresters were planting seedlings in Washington's mountains when a gently wobbly disc-shaped aircraft appeared and drifted toward a herd of elk. Nearly all the animals fled together, but one set off in a different direction. The UFO positioned itself over the lone elk and beamed it right off the ground, though the observers couldn't discern any visible means of support attached to it. The UFO wobbled more, seemingly struggling with the weight of its prey, and eventually rose so high that the witnesses couldn't see it anymore. They assume the elk had somehow ended up in the aircraft. When New Fork director Peter Davenport traveled to Washington to conduct an investigation, he was shown a carcass of a pregnant elk that had been found dead just a few miles from the UFO sighting. As for whether that was the same sorry creature that the UFO had supposedly targeted, we'll almost definitely never know. The other thing that's so crazy about this is the cows. Like cow mutilations. There are those alien related to, and also crop circles. So I should probably do some podcasts just on those alone, just because it's so crazy. So most of the time, here's some weird facts that are kind of crazy. So some UFO facts that I just thought were kind of interesting. There were a total of 12,618 UFO sightings from 1948 to 1969. And I thought, that's so many. I mean, it's kind of not, but it kind of is, right? And there was a secret panel developed to investigate UFO sightings in 1953. So this is how it kind of started. And there are presidents that have believed in UFO reports. I think President Lincoln was very spiritual. He was more in the spiritualist kind of things where he was there during seances and things. But I think even though Reagan, was spiritualist too, I think I remember a story and about Reagan. Oh gosh, I can't remember. Reagan believed in this and believed in that we were too. It wasn't just us. It's not just us. So, but I don't know if he could give out very much information. So, yeah, I need to look that more into that too. You think I'd be more? Here's what happens, you guys. It's not that I'm not prepared for these. I just go out on a tangent because I get so excited and I remember things that I read somewhere and then I want to tell you about it because I get super excited. It's not that I'm not prepared. So this is interesting too. A UFO is not the same as an extraterrestrial alien, which we kind of know. The UFO refers to any unexplained object or light in the sky. So this could be any government thing. It is not a term to describe an alien being. Almost all UFO sightings are simply unidentified flying objects and not alien encounters. But there are some, like the 4 guys that were in Michigan, that I'm pretty sure it was probably an alien encounter. So the next one is a UFO in Los Angeles caused 5 deaths in 1942. Shortly after the U.S. joined World War II, there was an air attacker over Los Angeles after an unidentified flying object was seen. At the time, the newspapers published a number of reports and speculations of cover-up to conceal any actual invasion by enemy airplanes. When documenting the incident, the United States Coast Artillery Association identified a weather balloon as the cause of the hysteria. That's another thing. They always blame weather balloons. Always. They always say it was a weather balloon. Always, always, always. And I think there's way more to it half the time. So they concluded that once the firing started, imagination created all kinds of targets in the sky and everyone joined in. Because of the chaos, 3 people died in car accidents and 2 of them died of heart attacks, which is kind of sad because everyone started freaking out of the hysteria of these unidentified flying objects. So that's kind of, some of these are, different facts. The earliest recorded UFO sighting in America was in 1639. A Puritan, John Winthrop, governor of Massachusetts, wrote about a strange sighting in the sky in 1639. He wrote that James, a sober man, witnessed a flaming light in the sky that was about 3 yards square while in a boat with a couple of friends. When the light moved, it looked like a large swine. Then, when the light finally faded away, 3 men on the boat were stunned to find themselves 1 mile upstream, as if the light had transported there. Again, this is 3 men in the wilderness, in a boat. Same thing happened to the teenagers we talked about. Same thing talk about the 4 men we talked about. It's just kind of crazy. So, and lots of alien sightings have been reported a lot around nuclear power plants. Scientists did try to communicate with aliens in 1960. Beginning in 1960 with the Project Ozma, scientists have been trying to communicate with alien life. So, it's kind of, like I said, I think there's just a lot more going on than we are let on. The Pentagon got hundreds of news reports of UFOs in 2022. Officials say they believe the rise on UAP reports are due to the U.S. government trying to destigmatize the topic of UAPs. Instead, they want to recognize the potential risks and both an aviation hazard and potential foreign surveillance efforts. So either the government figured out that there's going to be, they want to help with surveillance from other countries or even other worlds, either alien planets. So I don't know. So they're like making people not feel so bad if they call in and report. So there have been more UFO sightings in northern states than southern states. You are more likely to see strange sightings in the sky if you live in states like Washington, Montana, Vermont, Alaska, and Maine. All of those states have most recorded sightings, whereas the southern states like Texas, Louisiana, Georgia, Mississippi, and Alabama have the least. The Air Force destroyed a report of 2 UFO sightings by pilots. On July 24th, 1948, 2 domestic pilots witnessed another cigar-shaped craft. That's the ones those are reported a lot too, the circles and the cigar shape. UFO with windows. The Air Force ultimately destroyed the report of the incident, and many believe that it was a secret Soviet spy craft in American airspace. So, again, a lot of this can be different countries trying to spy on each other, but did you guys know there's a World UFO Day, and it's on July 2nd? If you are a UFO enthusiast, you may want to celebrate World UFO Day. The day is meant to raise awareness of UFO matters and encourage the government to disclose its findings. A lot of people are coming together and trying to have the government disclose information about UFOs. So, there was a mysterious wreckage in the desert of 1947. Although the wreckage remains that were found in the desert in New Mexico looked alien, they ended up being identified as belonging to a high-altitude balloon surveillance device for a program called Project Mogul. Yes, that's so crazy. So, as you can see, a lot of these stories all kind of say the same thing. And I don't know. I'll let you guys, this is a podcast where you guys get to kind of decide. You get to decide, have an open mind, see what you think, see what you believe but since the government has come out and said, yes, they have seen UFOs or AFOs or whatever they are, that it's kind of interesting. So I did find a website that said that if you're interested in looking at there's the top 10 UFO websites. Number 10 is the UFO Digest. And then number 9 would be National. Okay, that would be UFOdigest.com, UFOdigest.com. Then the National UFO Reporting Center. I think that's the NUFORC that I was talking about. And that is NUFORC.org. Then number 8 is UFO Evidence. It's just UFOevidence.org. Number 7 is the Alien Hub, and that's just alienhub.com. Then Montauk.net is also a website you can go to. Number 5 is Open Minds, which is openminds.tv. And I think the Montauk was .net. Yeah, Montauk.net. UFO Sightings Daily, and it is just UFOsightings.daily.com. And then number 3 is the Black Vault, and it's theblackvault.com. And then number 2 is Latest UFO Sightings, if you want to keep up on the UFO sightings. And the website is latest-UFO-sightings.net. And number 1 is Mutual UFO Network. And so it's just MUFON.com. So there you go, you guys. I don't know. I'd like to know what you guys think. I'd like to know in the comments or DM me on my Instagram at carriemugs.com or at carriemugs, and let me know what you guys think. Let me know although I've never had an experience, I do know some people who have, and I know, here's the thing, I can't, I speak to spirits, I see spirits, so I can't be like, well, you don't see aliens. It has to, it's nice to have an open mind, but let me know what you think. You can down below in the comments or on my YouTube channel or in my Instagram, let me know what you think, or if you've ever had an experience. I would love to hear it. In fact, maybe I just would make a podcast about all your guys' different experiences. So anyways, I love you guys. Remember that you have all of the magic inside of you. liked this episode, please hit the subscribe buttons so you never miss an episode.